Hello, everybody. I guess I'm live. My name is Calvin Hudson Wang. I'm the director, producer, writer, and editor of that film. Um, Thank you for joining us today. I would love to invite the panel to the table. First up is Sarah, the star of Residual Splendor. Glenn, also a co-star of Residual Splendor. We have Dr. Nancy Nixon joining us from the Tom Baker Cancer Center. And we have Dr. Karen Gelman joining us from the BC Cancer Agency, who happens to be piping in from Mexico City today. So thank you all for joining us today. We'll invite all our participants that are viewing online to submit their questions in the comment section. I won't directly be able to see them, but I've got some great people behind the scenes that will be sharing those questions with me. So I've actually got a couple of them passing my way already. This question actually goes out to Sarah, and it's actually kind of related. Actually, it might actually impact both Sarah as well as the physicians on the table. But how did COVID affect cancer screening and treatment? Why don't we throw that to Sarah first and get your take on
that? For me, COVID actually hit right when I was in the middle of my first chemo treatments. So I was already doing the things we were supposed to do with COVID. So I was self-isolating. I was, it was just wearing a mask, and Glenn could no longer come with me to every appointment and to chemo. So that was really the big difference for me. But I still had regular appointments. I guess the other thing is I no longer could see Dr. Nixon in person all the time. We had a lot of phone conversations. So different in that respect, everything went virtual.
Any take from the physicians? Dr. Nancy, do you want to maybe pipe in there?
Sure. Yeah, I think like Sarah said, one of the biggest challenges, to be honest, was the visitation. Like patients having to come in for treatments by themselves, patients in hospital alone. I think that was one of the biggest and longest impacts for our patients.
And any additional perspective, Dr. Gelman?
So I think that there's a whole different range of things that happened. One thing that happened is there was about fortunately in Canada, we reacted quite quickly. So I think mid-March of 2020 to May of 2020, things were very disrupted. And then I think we got more into the swing of things. So I think that there were people who missed their screening mammograms, and a lot of people might have had later diagnosis, and there's data on that. Excuse me, that there were some people who missed screening. For people within the midst of treatment like Sarah, suddenly having phone or televisits is quite different than being in a room. Going into chemo alone, that was different. There were things like clinical trials looking at new drugs that were halted for a while, but then we got those up and running. And there was a lot of concern about how to do things safely. I think all in all, it was difficult for everyone. It was difficult. Certainly, I'm sure Nancy felt the same as I did. You want to see people in person. You don't necessarily want to see them over the phone. And likewise for patients. But I think that we tried to react as quickly as we could. Certainly, a lot of things were disrupted, though. And you saw, we shot this in the middle of COVID because I had a mask on when I met you, Calvin.
That's right. That's right. Now, from the perspective of someone who's going through chemotherapy and being immunocompromised in that perspective, did this change a little bit around how you socialized, or how did that whole situation impact you, both Sarah and Glenn?
Yeah, we stopped going out. We stopped having people in. We kind of became hermits. But again, like I said, I was already doing all the COVID things for chemo, which is, keep yourself away from sick people, away from the general populace, I suppose. And so, yeah, that was what was different for us. I missed having, I used to host a lot of dinner parties and things like that. We stopped that kind of thing. And so that really was the big difference, was staying home and not going out as much.
I quit the job I had.
That's a big change.
Well, you have someone immunocompromised, and in my job, I saw a lot of different people all the time. Um, Plus the business downturns and whatnot that happened, it just wasn't worth all the various risks.
Yeah.
And actually, that was a real concern for a lot of people with children. When schools reopened, could their kids go to school? Could their kids have play dates? How is it going to affect them? So, there were a lot of those social things where there weren't answers. And I think cancer patients felt even more isolated than the rest of us. Or Sarah can speak up if she did, but I think a lot of cancer patients felt more isolated.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I was doing it anyway because of the chemo. So I don't know that I would have done anything different.
We have another question for Sarah. It's around the term scanxiety, and that it's between appointments and between scans. The question is, how did you manage the stress leading up to these things? Do you have a comment?
Oh, I'm really good at managing stress. I always have been. This has probably made me better. Everyone in my entire, like all of my work careers, everyone has always asked how I handle all the crazy things that I do. You just have to kind of, I think I make a lot of lists. I, try to keep ahead of it. And I think, as we said in the film, the biggest thing for me is making sure not to make something of it until it's something to be made of, so to speak. So I can't control everything, which for a control freak like myself is hard. And this makes it even harder. But we do the best we can. So, Glenn has been my rock and listened to me whine about things all the time.
And there's no point in operating on myth or maybes. It's only once something is concrete that it's time to worry and make plans. And even then, you've got a whole bunch of experts behind you that have figured things out before they've even told you what the news is.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a question for me. What inspired me to make this movie? The truth of it is I do a lot of work in education and documentary in health conditions, and as a filmmaker, I've sort of specialized in acute conditions, and when we were exploring kind of some of where the educational gaps were, it repeatedly came up that there's a lot of confusion around metastatic breast cancer. It's probably one of the most challenging ones that requires a tremendous amount of psychological support, not just from a knowledge and process gap. So I think that was one of the inspirations for why we wanted to prioritize this as a topic. Very bluntly, I didn't really want to direct this particular film, largely because I'm a male, and I thought it probably needed to have the perspective and the care and the insight from a female director. And then when I with producing and developing the story with Sarah, I think I offered to find her a female director, and I think she said no. You're fine. You'll do fine. So that's ended up why I additionally directed this one. But I think from an educational need, it is one where we thought there was some priority, and I think we're very lucky that that I was introduced to Sarah to really delve into her story and use that as a means to illustrate what that journey can look like. And then there's another question: how did you meet Sarah? So I can actually throw that to Dr. Nancy Nixon, because I was actually introduced to Dr. Nancy Nixon through one of her colleagues at the Tom Baker Cancer Center. And it's through Dr. Nixon that I was actually introduced and recommended to speak to Sarah as a potential for this project. So maybe you want to speak to that, Nancy?
Yeah, so I think, even watching the video and then hearing some of the things that we know about Sarah, you have to have thick skin to do something like this. You have to be able to deal with a lot of stress to do something like this. And I think it is a really important story, and it's a really hard story to tell. And I just thought that Sarah would do a great job, and her and Glenn handle things beautifully and with humor. And so I thought they would be a really good fit for something.
And any additional thoughts, Sarah or Glenn, on being involved in the project?
Oh, well, I always laugh about this one because Dr. Nixon one day at the end of one of our many calls, because we talk every 3 weeks on the phone, said, "Oh, would you be interested in being in a video and to talk about metastatic breast cancer for other, cancer patients?" And I said, "Oh, sure, definitely." And then you called me the next day, and you were the filmmaker, and I was floored. So my little video in my brain that was going to be done on Skype turned into an actual movie, which is fantastic. And I hope we can get it in front of as many people as we can, because to your point, this is a topic that needs to be talked about more. There's definitely a lot of misinformation out there. There's good information, but you got to be able to find it.
Yeah. We have another question for Sarah. Is there a special diet that you need to follow while receiving chemotherapy? And we might actually include some commentary from our medical experts here as well. But Sarah, do you want to kick that one off?
Sure. No. I eat everything I can. I've been very lucky. I have not had the traditional chemo side effects that a lot of people do. Yes, I lost my hair, but as far as the nausea, the vomiting, and not being able to eat anything, there's a lot of folks I know that have very, very different side effects to what I've had. So my story is my story. Other people will have different stories for sure, but I have not myself had a different diet.
And it also looks like Glenn's been keeping you well
He keeps me well fed, yes.
Part of the job.
Cooking, yeah. Are there any recommendations from a medical perspective, Dr. Gelman or Dr. Nixon?
So I think that, one of the things that Sarah epitomizes and showed beautifully, both her and Glenn in the movie, is that, you try to live life as normally as you can. Obviously, she's got bad days around chemo. She doesn't have the energy she had. She can't do everything. Obviously, there is this cloud there, but try to live life as normally as possible. And I think that's what's important, is eating well. There's no one diet to prevent cancer. There's no one diet. We talk about the Canada Food Guide as being probably the best thing, which limits the amount of red meat, limits processed meat, encourages fruits and vegetables, encourages not using too much processed flour or sugar. But if there's a wonderful piece of cheesecake sitting there, you eat it. You want to eat that piece of cheesecake. Because I think living life normally is really what Sarah's message is, and what is really important. Yes, there's metastatic disease, but there's no one died. And being punitive with yourself is the last thing that anyone with metastatic disease needs to do. I don't know if Nancy's got something to add.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I usually point out the Canada Food Guide as well and just say anything in moderation is okay. And I think, like you said, it's important to live as normally as possible and enjoy things that you enjoy.
I will also comment behind the scenes. Sarah and Glenn are international foodies. And it didn't, unfortunately, I don't think it made it as pronounced in the film, in the final cut of it. But you can trust me when going through their photos and understanding their journey and just seeing all the places they've eaten around the world that are world-class, Michelin star. It's an impressive catalog. I wish we could have incorporated more of that language, because I also consider myself a bit of a foodie. But yeah, I would say they eat very, very well. And it's just a delight that she's been able to navigate that and not really have that impact her in a negative way. There's another question around Sarah and Glenn. Why did you decide to share your story, and how has being involved in this film impacted you both? And how do you feel watching it today? So do you have any thoughts on that you wanna share?
Well, like I said before, I'm all about educating people. The more information that we can get out there, that's why I was excited to do this film and get it out there and share it with the world, because there can never be enough information about metastatic breast cancer, honestly. And even myself, when I was first diagnosed with, my original diagnosis, I didn't really know very much about, metastatic disease. So when I, got that, it was like, oh dear, okay, now I need to re-educate myself on everything I didn't know. And like I said, there was a lot of misinformation. So I'm happy to be able to share my story and, talk more about what the reality is.
And mine's not very interesting. I'm along for the ride, because if she wants it, I want it. So I'll support whatever she wants to do.
It's wonderful. Do you have any thoughts on what it feels like watching yourself back on screen, and the sort of the culmination of the film, which is an awkward question for me to ask, because I'm not sure if I'm prepared to hear the answer if you don't like it.
Terrible, Calvin. No, it was amazing. The experience, I think I've said this a lot of times. I'm so glad I got to go through the experience of making a movie. Now I understand why it takes so much time and money to make commercials and movies. It's ridiculous. It took us a week to, and it was 15 hours of film to create a little 25-minute movie. So, that was, I'm very happy with what it turned out to be.
Yeah.
I mean, every time I see it, I wonder early on who that guy is talking, and then remember it's me. So it's a little surreal.
Well, I know it's not easy for people to come forward and to share their story, and the process also is not always. It can be daunting and a little bit intimidating at times, and it can be you can feel very vulnerable. So I just want to make sure that you do recognize that this story, I think, is very, very important to tell, and that you're so bold and courageous to do this, because I think it is a very uncomfortable story for others to tell. And I think you guys have been really marvelous in how transparent you've been, as well as your willingness to continue to engage audiences as the film continues to meet them. So again, thank you for all the work that you put into it, and the drama that we've put you through in the filming process. I'd be remiss if I didn't call out our small but mighty crew that was involved in this. I'll highlight Amy Belling, who is the brilliant cinematographer, who is just done such incredible camera work. I'll also mention the remarkable work of Lisa Conway, who is the composer. I'm a huge classical music person. I grew up trained as in violin, so her spending so much time with me in arranging the strings and making sure that we had such a beautiful score to support this film. Her work needs to be credited as well. And then we had a group of animators and 3D artists, Ignis, Nadi, as well as Patricia. They all did such great work in addressing and visualizing these things in different ways. So much credit to them as well. So to the craftspeople. How much more time do we have? I think we've got maybe about 15 more minutes. So we'll tackle a couple of more questions. Here's an interesting question. I want to know if Sarah is still driving the Porsche, and that if you have another road trip to a dealership planned in the near future. If so, which one? Lamborghini, question mark, question mark, question mark.
We actually ordered another Porsche.
Oh dear goodness.
For pickup in Germany.
You're flying to Germany?
Whenever it's ready.
Incredible. I'll hope to get a ride in that the next time in Calgary. It's a very quirky. Oh, here's another question. Where did you get the watermelon pajamas from? I guess that's you, Sarah.
Yay, good costume choice. Yay, wardrobe. Costco. I will shout out Costco online.
Costco's got the goods.
Mhm.
Here's a question for the doctors. What did you learn from making the video? Well, that's an interesting one. Dr. Gelman and Dr. Nixon, any thoughts on that?
I, similar to Sarah, learned how long it takes to make a video because I knew my part was going to be short, so I thought the filming would be quite short, but it was longer than I expected. And I think it was really nice for me to learn more about Sarah and Glenn. Like, it was nice to get I knew quite a bit about like the dogs and the cars, but still not as much about how they met and all of those nice stories. So that was nice for me to see.
And anything to add, Dr. Gelman?
So I think one of the privileges that Nancy and I have is working with people. We meet amazing people. And, the world's a bit of a mess right now, but you get lifted every time you meet people with the kind of spirit that Sarah and Glenn have. And I think doing this film and hearing Sarah's story and seeing how Sarah and Glenn were willing to be open, exposed, talk about things, I think it's just it is very uplifting because basically humans are amazing. I think the other thing that's really really important is Sarah talked about control. And, I think one of the things we all think we have as adults is control, but actually we have uncertainty. And one of the things that cancer throws in your face right away is the lack of control you have and forces people to live in the moment. And I think, you know, that's another thing that I think was really brought out by this movie, and I think it's important. I guess in terms of movie making, I think I have to give credit to Calvin and the whole crew for doing it in the middle of COVID. I sort of was anxious. I looked at of coming into this small room with these cameramen and everyone in the midst of COVID and taking off my mask because I hadn't been in a room without a mask on except with my husband, I think. So it was interesting too. And I think, you guys, we learned about filmmaking, all of us, but you guys have to be given credit for plugging on with it during that time.
Yeah, thank you for that. It was certainly, it was not our first movie that we did in COVID, and it was certainly one that we tried to have the heightened sensitivity just given who we were interfacing with and ensuring that there's safety across the board. So yeah, thanks for trusting in us and for all of the process that we've had to go through to ensure that safety. There is another question related to cancer treatments. How are they evolving? It's a very broad one. Is that something that anyone would like to speak to, or?
So I think probably both Nancy and I can both speak to it, but I think the amazing thing in my career is I've seen an incredible evolving of cancer treatments. And although there are too many stories like Sarah's where people get cancers that are resistant to treatment that come back, or a new cancer that's evolved from an old cancer, we're curing more and more and more women with cancer. And Sarah, I'm sorry that you weren't one of those. What we also are doing is for women who have stage 4 cancer, which is advanced cancer or metastatic cancer, people are living longer. And we talked, both Nancy and I, a bit about precision medicine and new treatments and things like the drug conjugates. They're just one thing there, but we're seeing that the average survival of someone with stage 4 disease is extending. And it's not just survival, it's good quality of life. And I think that's what we want. We don't want people to get stage 4, but if people get stage 4, we want them to be able to live longer and better with that stage 4 disease. Things are changing all the time. And, we don't have cures, and we're not going to have one cure. But as Nancy pointed out, there are some stage 4 patients that appear to be cured now with these new treatments.
Wonderful. Now, also, I would also comment that Sarah's type of cancer is not, there's no universal type of cancer. And I think, is there any commentary on the cancer types and the evolution of the treatment that we weren't able to cover in this because they weren't specific to Sarah's type of cancer? Is there any evolution and new technology that can bring more optimism for patients coming forward as well?
So I do think we've made strides in all types of breast cancer, but HER2 breast cancer is one of the poster children of research. And if you look at historically what outcomes for women with HER2 breast cancer would look like compared to what they look like now, it's incredibly different. And I think it's the reason that we're able to be optimistic when we meet with patients, and it's the reason that we feel confident promoting research, is because you do see people who are able to benefit as a result. And I think if you were to ask me why is research important, I would talk about HER2 breast cancer.
I guess just to say the other thing is we're learning how to interrogate, how to question the tumor more. So there's a lot of stuff looking at mutations in tumors. And even if we find a mutation, we might not have a drug and the drug might not work. But we're learning about that. And the other thing that everybody always asks is about immune treatment. And for decades, we said, oh, there's nothing to do with immune treatment in breast cancer. And now there is. Certainly for the triple negative, for those that are estrogen negative, progesterone negative, HER2 negative, there's good evidence that immune therapy can help. It's not right for everyone, but it can help. And I suspect that over the next few years, we'll find out that immune therapy is good for some other cancers as well. We're not there yet. So there's never one fix, but I think that we're just learning more and more things about that. The other thing that's always really, really interesting is we're learning about things like the microbiome. We're learning about the bacteria and the whole body state. So it's not just the tumor we're learning about the host, the person who the cancer is growing in, and how can we put those two together. And I think the next decade or so is going to be really exciting for that. But I really want to caution the listeners that you can't go to Dr. Nixon tomorrow and say, I want you to treat me with microbiome treatment. She doesn't have it yet.
Right. But I think the portion that I think is quite comforting is that there seems to be a tremendous amount of research going on, both in your centers and other centers around the world. And I think the evolution that you've alluded to around the access, the knowledge around the body and the different types of cancers has evolved so much that it does look a lot more optimistic for folks, that they're not running out of treatment so quickly. Here's a question around confusion of whether cancer metastasizes in the organs or bones first. Does it vary by patient or cancer type? And can our doctors clarify?
So the most common place for breast cancer to go is bones. And certainly the most common kind of cancer is estrogen receptor positive cancer. And it most commonly goes to bones. But we know that cancer can go to any organ. And we know that different kinds of breast cancer go different places. So HER2 positive cancer really likes to go to the brain, unfortunately. HER2 positive cancer likes to go to the liver. It does go to the brain, it does go to the lung, it does go to the ovaries, it goes everywhere, but it likes to go other places. Triple negative cancer likes to go to the brain too, it likes to go to the lungs. So we, right now, no one cancer. There are people with estrogen positive cancer that never get it in the bones, and likewise. So there's no one place. I think one of the things that's very scary for cancer patients is they say, well, I've had cancer. Why isn't Dr. Nixon doing a scan every month on me to look for those cancer spots? And there's a lot of reasons. First of all, the majority of women are cured, or persons are cured with their cancer. The second thing is you don't want to expose someone to all that radiation, everything. But one of the exciting things that's starting to happen is we're starting to do liquid biopsies. It's called blood tests, where we can look for tumor DNA in the blood. And it's not ready yet in breast cancer. It's more evolved in some other cancers. But it might be that in the future, Sarah would have finished her surgery and finished her original treatment and would have gotten blood tests done. And it might have been that there would have been a sign in that blood test 6 months before she was diagnosed this way that might have made it easier to treat. But again, that's not something you can get right now. There are commercial tests out there, but don't waste your money on them. They're not worth doing. But I think that's something else we're going to be able to do. And for women with the uncertainty of, is a cancer back, that kind of blood test done maybe once every 6 months, once every year might be reassuring. But, I don't know if that's how we're going to be doing it. It's just something that else also is in research. I don't know if Nancy's got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think one of the biggest uncertainties with breast cancer is early detection of recurrence, and whether or not, if we detect it early, is that going to improve long-term outcomes. And that's why we don't do those scans and those tests, is because we don't know. And until we know, it's hard to guide our patients around what to do. And bone certainly is the most common, but unfortunately with HER2-positive disease, like Dr. Gelman pointed out, it does like to go to the brain, and the brain is a really hard place to treat and comes with a lot of added toxicity. And so I think that's another great area of research where we could be doing better.
We have probably time for one more question. This one, I'm not sure if I understand the context. It says, is the treatment that Sarah is taking today in the new cancer center? I'm assuming there's a new facility. Is that what it's referring to? What does that new facility have to treat cancer? Or what advances does that new facility have to treat cancer? I'm not sure if I know the context of that. Perhaps Dr. Nixon, you can.
Maybe they're referring to the new cancer center, which is going to be beautiful. But I think, probably, in my opinion, what the best things about the cancer center in terms of improving patient care will be all of us located in the same space. So having multidisciplinary teams in the same building, and having access to our own imaging and lab will be very helpful for our patients, because if we've had to have blood work done, as Sarah's had multiple times in the past few months, it's really, really hard to get blood work and to get it done on time without waiting forever. So hopefully having our own space will help ease the patient experience a little bit.
Great. So it now is 8 o'clock. I would love to thank the generosity of time and contribution from our esteemed panel, Sarah, Glenn, Dr. Gelman, and Dr. Nixon. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to the Royal Canadian Institute for Science for hosting and providing the facilities to have this live screening and Q&A. I'll pass that over to Kasar for any closing remarks, but thank you so much for the opportunity to screen our film.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We actually have one last question from our audience. Someone asked, Glenn, what is your favorite dinner to make Sarah? And then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Oh, wow. That's quite a big ask. I'm a big fan of making briskets. So you throw it on the smoker for a day, and, it's great for the next week.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. To all of you, thank you to the entire cast for the enlightening discussion, and thank you for making this film. We have a lot of comments from our audience just thanking both Sarah and Glenn and the rest of the cast members as well as Calvin, obviously, for sharing the story and for bringing this story to a film, which was great. So thank you so much again. And to our audience, I wanted to thank everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed tonight's screening. We'd love to know what you thought of the film and of the question and answer period. And so please share your feedback with us via a feedback form, which we'll be putting in the chat shortly. But you'll also receive that in an email just shortly after the event as well. And RCIScience is going to be back with some more events. You can join RCIScience on February 15th for a cybersecurity panel with the University of Ottawa's Institute for Science, Society, and Policy as we explore the increased importance of cybersecurity. You can also keep an eye up on our website, rciscience.ca, or subscribe to our newsletter and be among the first to receive details about all of our upcoming events right to your inbox. And again, I wanted to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. The Q&A portion of tonight's session will be available on YouTube to watch after after tonight. And I again wanted to thank everybody and have a great evening. Thank you so much, folks.